Welcome. My name is Alexandra Terry. I'm the chief curator at Museum of Contemporary Art Santa Barbara, and we are thrilled to be here tonight with DJ Javier. This talk is sort of to launch an amazing collaboration between DJ and the museum. It's for a limited edition beach towel that DJ designed that we are just thrilled with. And if you're not on our mailing list, please do so, join so you get all the links for all the updates. You can head to our website and sign up for our newsletter there. But also just head to our website and check out the towel. And it's also, it's on our Instagram, it's on DJ's Instagram. But DJ, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is awesome.
It's awesome. You and I have been talking about this. I don't remember when we started talking about this collaboration, but it's been a while. It took some time.
Yeah, it was a little bit of brainstorming, but yeah, it's crazy how fast it went, and now it's there and being sold. But yeah, it's awesome. Yeah,
it's here. We've already had, it's like I said, it's a limited edition. So if you guys are interested, head to our website, order one for yourself. But yeah, we just want to take this opportunity to learn about DJ's practice as an artist, as a designer, and you can see he's in his studio. You get a special glimpse of what he's working on in the moment. But I was hoping we could just start. I'll just give a brief bio and then I'd love to have some background information from you. So DJ Javier is a multidisciplinary visual artist, designer, and art director known for his bold artwork, merging traditional folk art execution with a youthful California perspective. Blurring the lines of art and design, DJ's work finds its focus within, but is not limited to, traditional graphic design, fine art, illustration, and mural work, drawing inspiration from the countercultures of Southern California, including surfing, music, graffiti, and street style and aesthetics. His artwork has led him to collaborations with clients including Amazon, Patagonia, Adidas, SeaVees, Surfrider Foundation, 805 Beer, Teva, I never know what to say, Undefeated, and Parks Project, amongst others. DJ is currently art director of the footwear brand SeaVees and runs a small clothing brand. And is it pronounced Canto? Canto. And DJ lives and works in Santa Barbara. So if you could just start us out telling us about your background, how you got into art and design, and how did you end up where you are now?
Yeah, I think, I guess I don't even know where to begin, but for me, ever since I was young, I was always painting or drawing. I think it was more so like a hobby kind of thing growing up. And I think I didn't even know what like graphic design was until probably like I graduated high school. But kind of like that whole creative journey, like I wanted to pursue it, but I didn't really know how to manifest it into a career, I guess. And yeah, I think it's hard too. I think being like a first generation immigrant and having, parents who came here from the Philippines, like, for them to come here and like give up so much. And then as opposed to me wanting to be like some sort of businessman or like a doctor or a lawyer, me being like, I kind of want to do art, and there's my sister commenting, okay, we should mute her. Someone kick her out. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think, I always had that creative spark and energy. And it wasn't until probably graduating high school where I began to realize like, oh, I can start putting these things together and actually pursuing them as like a career. And it's funny, the whole art piece of my work that like is really bubbling up now, it was on pause for like quite a while. Like, throughout high school, I was kind of pursuing it and taking different classes, but by the time I got to college and realized what graphic design was, it was just like kind of like fully diving into that. And I kind of spent most of my energy like, crafting that creative side of my work. But then, yeah, I think, a lot of this like more art oriented work and a lot of the stuff that I've been doing, which are, these artist collaborations, like with you guys. And I've done some, obviously, as you had mentioned, like with Surfrider Foundation, like a kind of art oriented collaboration through them, with surf brands like Visla. Those ones, all those projects were more kind of geared towards like how would you approach whatever collection we're working on. But the whole like aesthetic of my work and the style and the execution, it really didn't, like it didn't really even really begin to manifest until, right when I graduated college. I landed a job at a packaging design firm, and for the most part, we did work for CPG. So essentially, like we would do packaging for all the brands that you'd see in the grocery store, and so it was awesome, and it was almost kind of like a creative boot camp for me of like graduating school, getting thrown into that, and working with really big clients, and me only being like 22 and not really knowing what I'm doing, but kind of being forced to like this project is worth a lot of money and there's really big people and there's kind of high stakes, and so like um, that was like a great place for me to grow as a graphic designer. But I think all of like my artwork and like kind of the stuff behind me, like that didn't manifest until yeah, until I think a little bit after that job. And essentially, and I have them here. But what I would do while my computer was loading at work, and so probably this is like maybe like 5 years ago or so. So it wasn't that long ago, but I would begin to like doodle in these like little field notebooks that I bought at like a bookstore that was like a few doors down from the studio. And so and the studio was in Ventura on Main Street. And so yeah, I went and like I bought these to write like notes with like when we were in meetings and doing like critiques of the work and stuff like that. But I ended up drawing way more in them than like actually like listening to my boss and like writing down like, oh, type needs to be bigger, like the the onion on the front of this chip bag is too small. Like I would have those, but like for the most part, it was just filled with drawings. And from there, that's where like a lot of the work that you see behind me is almost like the those were the creative seeds that kind of led to where I am now, with a lot of my work and kind of my styling and figuring out like, oh, this is what I like to do with colors. This is what I like to do with like layout, orientation, and like subject matter and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so it wasn't really until like that job where I felt like super burnt out, just by like the work I was doing, that like, yeah, we're at like a creative agency and I'm so grateful for that job. But at the end of the day, I'm like, this work is totally just getting ripped apart, and like it's not really, it's more so like, okay, what will make it sell as opposed to like what is like aesthetically pleasing. And it was hard to kind of find that balance at times. But yeah, it was basically that, me doodling, and then I started to like actually draw more, like not for any sort of client, not for like any sort of freelance, working with like different surf brands or whatever, doing t-shirt graphics. I was solely just drawing and exploring my creativity just because. And I would just draw in those all the time, when I'm at work, probably when I should be working, after work, before work, on my lunch break. And then it became like, oh, maybe I should start to draw bigger things, or maybe I should like buy a painting set, even though I haven't painted since like I was like 16. And that began to kind of like snowball. Yeah, and that's kind of like where I am now. Like it literally was like those little notebooks were like the little snowball that kind of rolled into like this avalanche almost of like creativity and where I am with my career. And so that's kind of like where I am now. And so it's funny, like sometimes when I go to like different art stores, like I'm still like, I don't know what like use, like I don't know what is like the right brush cleaner, or like I don't know which brush is right, or what I should use for like whatever project I'm working on. I think now I'm obviously like way more acclimated with that. But for a while, like I kind of took off the artist hat and fully was like diving into design, which I still am. Like all my work is basically split 50-50 of fine art work, and like traditional commercial graphic design work.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like kind of like a newer thing that I'm still unpacking. But I think yeah, I mean, with like almost like anything I do, like when I have an idea, like I just go like fully into it. And I think this like more fine art piece of my work was something that I just like fully dove into, basically. But yeah, so that's kind of how I ended up where I am now.
And I'm curious because obviously the two feed one another, the design work and the artistic practice. And is there a place for you where you have a clear definition, or is that not important? Is there just a lot of, because you do a lot of creative projects just consistently, so do you consider both of these kinds of lines of your practice one and the same, or do you find a time where you have to kind of switch gears?
I think for me, it all really depends on like what specifically I'm working on. But I think having both these sides is they've kind of like helped each other out in a sense where, you know, for instance, like I might be working on something at SeaVees and it's just like I'm updating, you know, one of our landing pages and I'm like moving blocks of text around. And then from there, I'm like, oh, I'm like, how I'm seeing it is how I would lay out a painting of like, oh, it's really heavy over here and there's a lot of text, but it's spread out. And there's like a really compact like photo here. And like, oh, if I shift it this way. And so I almost see it in like the lens of fine art. And then when it comes to, you know, some of my paintings, like a lot of the times, like they're very almost like kind of blocked out and angular in a sense of like, oh, the subject sits here and it sits here and it sits here. And it's almost like when I'm visualizing it, it's like I'm looking at like a block of text, you know, and I'm just like, oh, that doesn't really fit because that doesn't balance well. And I need to add something here because like the spacing is off. So I'll move some of the elements down there. But
so really your approach is you're kind of switching back, or it's not even switching back and forth. Your approach is just one and the same, but you're thinking about it, you know, from the same, and I think that's probably what makes your collaborations with these different companies and different organizations so appealing to them,
yeah,
because you have that broad vision.
totally. Yeah. And I think I mean, it's been really helpful too. I think having just like the traditional graphic design background, like when it even comes to like a lot of like the mural work that I do, I treat it, even though like I see that as like a large like fine art piece, like the whole process coming up to it, I treat it as if like I'm working on, you know, like a branding exercise for like a client where there's like phases and there's rounds and there's multiple PDFs and there's like different sketch concepts with notes and as opposed to like here, like this is it, this is the final thing, like you need to take it or leave it. But I mean, even with us working on the towel, as you saw, it was like I had 4 different concepts and you know, you lean towards one. I was like, okay, let's do that one. Here's the refined, clean version, but here's like 4 color options of that. And so, yeah, even in working in that space, it's like I think they've helped one another a lot. I think the fine art work has really helped my design become a little more loose and have a little more personality, as opposed to like everything needs to be exactly like this and these are the rules to design. But then the traditional, you know, graphic design, commercial art side of me has helped my fine art stuff that can be kind of chaotic. And I think, I don't know, I'm sure like working with artists sometimes can be kind of difficult of like, well, this is how it needs to be. But I think my graphic design kind of side of my brain helps like navigate the fine art stuff and helps it kind of almost like loosen up or tighten up a little bit. But then my fine art side helps my design side loosen up a little bit.
Totally, yeah.
Kind of like they're helping like they're helping each other balance each other.
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, working with you and going through the different phases of drafts and sketching was like, so the layout was great. It was really amazing to see your vision, not only in the artwork, but how you were able to define the project and, you know, define the different elements. And I mean, it turned out amazing. And I was hoping you can tell us more about your other commercial work. So how long have you been with SeaVees, and how has that, you know, how has your work with SeaVees worked alongside your artistic practice?
Yeah, I've been there. Actually, I don't know. And I don't know if anyone from SeaVees is here on this, but if you can tell me how long I've been at SeaVees for, maybe like 3 years or so. Yeah, I think, I mean, as you see, there's like a lot of stuff that I do with SeaVees that is very much so art oriented, whether it's like the mural on the side of our 24 Mason flagship store right over here in the Funk Zone, or the new one that we're opening up in Newport Beach. I did like this like giant postcard that you stand into, and that was all completely hand painted. Or down to like different elements. Like if you go into the shop, you might see some of the graphic tees, some of like, I don't know, like different kind of like goods and merchandise and stuff like that. But then also working on things like, for instance, like we just released a new shoebox that is shipping on containers. So it doesn't come in another box, and so it's much so the waste is like greatly reduced. All the glues are much more environmentally, or there's no glues, so it's environmentally friendly. The box just folds into itself. Down to like working on different like seasonal campaigns and creative with the team, and collaborating with a lot of we have such a talented group of people there. But yeah, so I think it's funny, like when you look at my Instagram feed, you might see like, oh, he's just drawing stuff all day, or like painting stuff, or like making like, oh, here's this like crazy graphic thing or t-shirts. But then like at SeaVees, it's like I think it's nice because I'm super passionate about when it's that stuff too when it comes to just like branding or brand strategy or like positioning, like stuff that I learned like early on in my design career, at the end of school and at my first job. Being able to apply that at SeaVees has been super awesome. But yeah, it's funny. It's like people don't really see, oh, Michael Shaner per LinkedIn. Okay, thank you. Uh, and Michael Shaner, by the way, is he's my partner for Canto, our little T-shirt brand that we do. But yeah, so I think yeah, it's fine. There's like a lot of stuff that I do that I don't really post because it's like it's hard to explain. Like, oh, we did this like repositioning of the brand, and like I don't really know how to explain it in like 10 slides. Like this is what we did on Instagram. But yeah, they've like it's been like a really awesome relationship, and like I said, it's one of those things where some of the more very commercial type work or things that like people might think are like, oh, I didn't know like he was doing that kind of stuff, whether it's like laying out an email potentially, or updating some of like our design assets, like scooting a logo like 10 pixels over. All those like little things are almost like these little pebbles that help my creativity, and like it creates like this big mountain. um, but yeah, like they definitely feed into one another. Yeah, it's like those little things that kind of go back and forth, like I said, of like,
Yeah.
oh, this thing is actually assisting me help, it's helping me develop like whatever I'm working on in my fine art sense. And then working on a painting, I'm like, oh, like this orientation, like that would work so well for like this marketing asset that we're putting in the box or something. And so yeah, it's like that. I think that relationship I found between those just different creative practices, like I said, it's almost like they're beginning to blend into one another,
Yeah.
which is great because I think it helps me stay really sharp.
And speaking of the mural outside of SeaVees, that kind of leads me to ask you about the different murals that you have in town, because you've partnered with other commercial brands and things like that to do, I guess, branding type murals, but you also have done just sort of artistic murals. I mean, not that they're any different, but murals on your own accord. And then I wanted to ask about the mural that you painted for Haven it's at the barber shop, right, on De La Vina. So I'm sure that there are plenty of people on this call, if you're in Santa Barbara or from the area, you've seen DJ's work in different parts of town, but I'd love to hear more about your mural work.
Yeah, it's funny, the whole doing these like large scale like public works. Like I never at any point throughout like my whole creative career was like, oh, I should do more of those, or I'd love to do one. It's like I just never really considered it, like a thing that I would do, I guess, or like an opportunity that would arise. But yeah, it wasn't until yeah, and it was fairly recent too, maybe like 2 years ago or so. One of my good friends was helping brand a restaurant in Venice and was like, hey, can you come do a mural in the beer garden of the restaurant? And I'm like, I've never painted anything bigger than like this big. Like I can try. I have no idea how to do it. But he was like, no, I think you figured out. And so we ended up doing that. And then from there, like I said, kind of like with almost like a lot of aspects of my career, it's like it just snowballed into like different, opportunities. And so yeah, that kind of led to all these other works around town, especially. And I think working in town too is always something that I always try to reserve time and like energy, like to work with people local. I think investing back into the community is super important. But yeah, as far as like the two hands that are on Haven, yeah, I painted that in June, and so that was after George Floyd was murdered. And Alex, who's like a good friend who owns Haven, and he's opening a bike shop right next to Haven. he had reached out to me and we'd worked together on different things and different collaborations and stuff for fun. And so he was just like, I want something big that shows, that just represents the sense of community, especially in Santa Barbara. And so, yeah, I just kind of showed up and like knocked it out in like a few hours and wanted something that really spoke to the community and kind of was like this, symbol of diversity, obviously, because the hands are two different skin colors. But
yeah, I was going to say, for those who haven't seen it, can you kind of just briefly describe what the mural is?
yeah, so it's two hands clasping, and they're two different skin tones, and they both have shackles on the wrists, and the shackles are breaking. And so, yeah, we wanted something that obviously was really bold because we just wanted it to speak loudly in the neighborhood. But something that represented that sense of unity, especially between people of color, especially right now. And so, yeah, we ended up making like a stack of like 1,000 stickers also, and we made T-shirts, which donated the proceeds to El Centro here in town. But yeah, like I said, I think always that's like between that and some other different opportunities. I think, like I said, finding ways to support the community, and I think for me, like my best lane and my best tool has always been through art and creativity, and I think. Yeah, I think that's the place that I excel at the most. And so at that time, whether it was like raising money for making prints and raising money for like the food bank during like the beginning of COVID or whatever it may be, yeah, I think always reserving time and effort, whether it's like doing like the large scale like mural work just for free, just to create something that builds the sense of unity and symbolizes the community within the community, or like any of the other like little things that I've done. But yeah, so I guess it's kind of like a brief like synopsis of like my mural work. Like I said, it's like I never expected to do any large scale work, but like even now in my inbox, I'm like trying to like organize like up and coming opportunities and stuff like that. And but it's awesome. I think it's nice to step away from the computer and be outside, because it's not only is it like a lot of physical work, but it's also just like mentally. It's like I'm literally drawing massive, and so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Well, I
that's
think, your work giving back to the community, not just on a, public art level, which is so important, to kind of create a sense of empowerment amongst your audience, but within the community, and have them engage with the work and kind of see what you're up to. But the fact that you're donating to local organizations that are doing amazing work is so cool. And I wanted to ask you about the collaboration or the partnership that you had with Surfrider Foundation, which was a capsule collection that you donated. Well, I'll let you talk about it, but you donated proceeds to the Color the Water organization in LA. And this is, related to the fact that you're such an outspoken advocate for diversity and equity and inclusion within the surf community. So I'd love it if you could tell us more about how that project came about, and, your relationship to the surf community and your racial justice work within that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that it's funny how that project actually came about. I was just on Instagram, and I was trying to find different nonprofits or organizations or just like collectives or groups that focused on bringing people of color just like to the water, essentially, to take them surfing, or whether it's like beach activities or even just like outdoors. And so I figured like, I might as well email Surfrider and see like, hey, can you send over a list? I'd love to get involved with like a local one if we can find one. And they sent over this like long, extensive list. And at the very end, they're like, hey, we'd love to work together at some point. And this was probably like end of the summer, maybe it was like August or September of last year. And so I had this idea. I was like, oh, well, what if we just worked on a capsule collection that was like, like geared towards people of color. And it was something that I hadn't seen. And yeah, I think for myself, working with a lot of different surf brands and people within the industry, it's tough. I think for a while, I would always design whether it was like t-shirt graphics or even some of the past collections I had done prior to the Surfrider one, to fit and communicate to a certain demographic of, oh, this is what surfers want. Like this is what they want to wear. These are the designs they like, and even down to like the fit of the clothing. Like, oh, they want like a 4-ounce tee that's like skinny and long, and like only really works if you're like a ripped surfer, but it doesn't really like fit or like look good on anybody else. And so for me, I kind of approached Surfrider and I was like, I'd love to design a collection, down to like making sure like we print on garments that are friendly for all body types. And then ideally finding a nonprofit organization, whether it be in LA or Santa Barbara or Southern California, that is doing a lot of this really good work, like on the ground, like actually at the beach. And so they got connected with Color of the Water, and yeah, I designed a whole collection. It was 3 t-shirts and a hoodie and a hat, and all the graphics. Like I said, I think I had to put myself in this like headspace of what would the young, chubby 5th grade DJ want to wear, and not like what the typical, oh, this is what the surf demographic wants. Like this is what the surf shops want. I had to put myself in that headspace and be like, what do I want to wear? It's like, well, I don't want something with like dainty type. I want like old English, and I want like really tough imagery that is more correlated with like rap music than it is with, and this isn't a bad thing, but like acoustic guitars and Jack Johnson and like reef sandals, like,
Yeah.
which, like I said, it's not a bad thing, but I was like, what's going to cater to like that demographic that I feel like within the surf community isn't being spoken to or isn't being represented. And so within the work, I was like, I want all the work to like have that kind of emotion and just like visual language. Then also down to the garments, making sure that, hey, if we print on something, like I want it to be a beefier shirt that fits a little boxier, for people who maybe like to wear their shirts baggier, or for people who aren't like the typical like slender like stereotypical surfer. And so it was great. They were like so amazing to work with, and they were super supportive, down to like sourcing garments that they had never used, and they're like, if we're going to do this, let's do it the right way. And so and then obviously teaming up with Color of the Water and giving them half of the proceeds from the collection, it was awesome. And I think they're doing really awesome work in Venice. And yeah, they Surfrider had sent over like a whole like box of the merchandise that I'd worked on. And yeah, I remember like first opening that like Dropbox folder of all like the imagery, because like they had shot all the collection on all of the people that were taking part in the surf lessons, or people who were just part of the collective, and they would just come out and surf with the crew. And for the first time, I was like, I like got choked up looking at like my work out. And like I've seen my work like on the street. I've seen people like wearing a t-shirt I made, or like a sticker on a water bottle, or like even randomly like on the internet or like on TV or something. And I would always be like, oh, that's cool. Like my shirt's there. That's awesome. But I think it wasn't until like I made this collection, like I wanted it to like speak to the community that I'm a part of. And even though like I didn't know anybody like in any of the shots, I was like, I got super choked up because I'm like, this is for them. Like this collection, down to the cut of the garment, down to how everything is designed, like the obviously like the subject matter and like what it's saying within the design. Like it was for them, and it was cool to connect with Color of the Water, and I'm still friends with them now. And just see like how like, yeah, I think just seeing my work on people who look like me, like it really like spoke like super loudly for me. And it was just super cool to see, yeah, to see like the community that like, I want to see supported, and the community that I'm a part of as a person of color who's a surfer, to see the gear on them was like, it was just massive. And so,
I mean, that's
yeah,
so
that's
incredibly
probably
thoughtful. Like the amount of kind of consideration and empathy that went into, a collection like that, imagining and thinking back to, what would I have wanted to wear? Because it's one thing to kind of bring your personal experiences and references into it, but to get to the point where you're thinking about the fit, because it's so true. I mean, we're talking about very mainstream kind of sizing and look, and it looks best on this type of body. And I think for you to consider something like that is so powerful, because it affects people on so many levels.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's down, like it's like you had mentioned, like down to those little details, like that was super key. And I mean, even for me, I remember like I've gone into surf shops and I've worked with different brands where they send me stuff and I put it on and I'm like, it looks like I'm wearing like a muumuu, because like it's down to my knees and it's really skinny and the neck is like this big, and it's like, okay, this is not made
Yeah.
for me. Like this is made for like whatever the model is that they had shot, the gear in. So yeah, like those small details, I think, yeah, like I'd never really thought of, but I was like, if I have an opportunity to like obviously visually design the collection, but like let's make sure like it's actually wearable too, was like a huge component.
And what are the other ways that you're approaching, raising awareness around diversity and inclusion in the surf community?
Yeah, I think I mean, aside from that, like I did some work late last year with Patagonia, and I did like this temporary like window mural for this group called Un Mar de Colores down in Encinitas, and they do a similar thing where it's like a surf camp for underprivileged youth, mostly yeah, just kind of like youth of color, essentially, like a surf camp where yeah, they would just like connect these people to the beach and even bring the family down and make it more of like almost like a communal thing. And so worked with them, and I'm actually working with them too on just some like creative for a future event that they're going to be putting on. But yeah, so I think obviously those are kind of like, that is like a very tangible example of like things I'm doing. And then always, trying to like, whether it's donating like my time or efforts or creativity, like I said, I think for me, my most effective tool that I've learned is like, oh, I can knock out art and graphics and stuff like that, like super easy. Like that's the language I speak. Like I'm not a public speaker. Like I'm not good at, other, I don't know. I think like just like that, like that's like my talent and that's my lane. So that's like what I want to strive for. But I think obviously like a big thing is just, even for me, like I don't really tend to be, wasn't really super opinionated growing up or vocal with certain things. And I know that with my work, like a lot of my work has ramped up, and like even like people follow me on Instagram and like the clients I've worked with. And so even using my social media as a platform to be like, hey, this isn't really cool in surfing, like this isn't for all kind of like the good vibes and like, that surfers tend to talk about. It's like the lineup is like totally toxic. Or if you go onto Instagram and you open any comment section on like any sort of like surf publication that, and whether they put out a statement or post something, it's like the surf community has a lot of work to do. And so yeah, which isn't, it's kind of sad, because I've been vocal about certain things, things that I don't think are outlandish whatsoever, and I've received like pushback, which is really funny, of people that like I thought I respected, and now I'm just kind of like, oh, I didn't really know that you kind of thought that way. And things as simple as like, hey, surfing should be more inclusive. Like it's crazy that we live in a city like Santa Barbara, where there's such like a large, Hispanic population, but like when you go to the beach, like sometimes I'm like, I'm the only like brown person in the whole lineup, and so it's like, what, that anybody can like make their way to the beach, but like why is it that, like, is there some sort of like cultural thing, or is it like, do people not feel welcome? And I know for me growing up, yeah, I didn't see surfing as like oh, that's a cool thing that I want to pursue. I'm like, I feel like that's kind of like a white kid sport, and like that's not really for me. And so yeah, like I said, I think whether it's using my creative capabilities to like lend a hand, or obviously being a little more vocal on social media. And I also, I think I tend to like have a bunch of ideas at once. And so I'm like slowly chipping away at like all these different things that I'm working on. But I am trying to put together a little bit of essentially like a surf meetup for people of color. And so like that's it, it's in its infancy stages. And like, it's funny, like my wife's always like, you need to just do one thing and you just need to finish it. But I literally have I mean, as you can see behind me, it's like I have way too much that like I focus my energy on. But I think that's one thing that I'm trying to invest more time into, and hopefully, obviously, with the vaccine being distributed and the summertime coming up, that could be a great opportunity to start building more community for surfers of color in Santa Barbara. But yeah, until then, it's whenever I can, it's just like lending a hand and giving people my services for free, or just engaging in these conversations, whether it's like a platform like this or in the lineup or with like a group of friends. I think it's always important to at the smallest level. I think that's where like effective change happens, is like at like the one-on-one level. But yeah, so it's kind of like where I'm at right now. Yeah.
Well, and it's clear that, the topics that are important to you and the themes that are important to you and your kind of own ethical code is runs throughout all of your work. I mean, that your approach to the collaboration with MCASB and also the collaboration that you did with Dune Coffee Roasters, you're bringing your voice and you're really letting that shine through and letting your beliefs run through all of the work that you're doing. And I think that's really powerful and really shows, and I just hope that, and I can imagine it's making an impact in the community. And I'm sure so many people are really grateful that you are so outspoken about it, because, you'll be able to, lift up your peers and other people with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's been awesome to, as a creative, build like this wider community that I think I just didn't know who else was like kind of doing cool stuff in town, or just connecting with people who have like a similar mindset as myself, and being like, oh, I'm like building a friendship with someone who like has the same vision, whether it's on the same topic of like surfing, whether it's Chris, who had organized the Black Lives Matter paddle out, connecting with him and just like getting coffee with him and engaging in conversation, or I had looked up, to like JJ Ortiz, who owns Golden Eagle, since I was like a little kid, and like to know like he's a person of color and he surfs and he has like a great artistic style. And so it's been cool connecting with those people who like share a same vision, especially when it comes to surfing, and having the water be more inclusive and be more diverse. But yeah, it's just kind of like baby steps, trying to like navigate that along the way. And like I said, it's just so funny. I feel like surfing is one of, I mean, maybe there's other sports, but it's just like it's such a funny thing when you go in the water and you can see grown men like totally flip on a dime and like act like a child, like seeing two grown men get into like a shouting match, or like see people become like overly protective over like a beach break, where it's like, this isn't like your land, like this isn't, like it's just there's a lot of toxic pockets within surfing, which is really unfortunate. And even saying something as simple as like, I feel like the beach should be more diverse and inclusive, and not alienate people, and not paint a picture that like, oh, this is what surfing looks like and this is what surfers look like. But I mean, obviously through this like network of different surfers of color that I've been building, it's been cool to like build this like bigger relationship, and yeah, just like bigger network of people who like, oh, they look like me and they also love to surf, and they like carry the same passion for making the lineup more diverse. But yeah, like I said, it's baby steps trying to navigate that. Just because, yeah, it's for whatever reason, I think it is systemic racism that's like intertwined within surfing. It is more, I feel like, more of an uphill battle than people would think.
Well, thank you for the work that you're doing for our community and for the surf community at large. And I want to make sure we have time to talk about your work. And you pointed behind you. I'd love to hear more about your artistic process. So I've had the pleasure of being in the studio and getting to see your pieces at different phases of being in process. And so maybe you can tell us, in your studio, you've painted on board like you have behind you, on jackets, on flippers, on surf fins. And so it's clear. Oh, and the trays, you were telling us about the food trays. I'd love to hear, like, what materials do you pick? How do you approach that? And what does a typical day in the studio look like for you?
Yeah, I think maybe as far as like kind of the uh, I guess like the things I paint on in terms of, I think whenever you see anything like that, like it's always wood panel. I think the stiffness is really nice to work with, and I tend to sand down a lot of my work after I finish it when it goes on wood panel, because it just has this texture that kind of it mimics a lot of like a lot of the design stuff I do, where like I love, you know, hand drawing my graphics and having them keep their imperfections, like especially like when I run them to print and stuff like that. And so it's funny, like trying to translate like my graphic design background into like my fine art side. And so um, yeah, even when, you know, you look at a lot of my work, like it still maintains like the same like thought process that I have for graphic design. Like it's probably only going to be a few colors, and it's going to be like layers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's it. Kind of like how I treat, you know, like a t-shirt graphic, like, oh, it's 2 colors, and then there's a color on top, and then that's it. And so I think I've been trying to push myself and experiment more with how I go about executing and like playing with colors and playing with layering. As far as painting on different things, I think like the flippers and painting on surf fins and painting on food trays, I think it just ties back to that almost like surf ephemera, and just kind of like reinterpreting it. I think it has a little bit of just kind of this like lo-fi nature to it, which I really gravitate towards. And I think for me, not going to school for like traditional fine art, like I just kind of like found like a back door, and I was like, I'm just gonna do it this way, I guess. Even though it's like, oh, that's not really conventional. Like, you know, I mean, other people totally do this type of work too. Like I'm looking at all my fins and trays and stuff, but yeah, I just kind of figured like this feels really natural to me. And it kind of like goes hand in hand with like, you know, painting on these different surfaces. Like when it comes to like the textures of my painting, like it has like a little bit of like um I don't know, like uniqueness to it that I really enjoy. But yeah, so when it comes to that, yeah, I think it totally comes back to yeah, there's like a connection to surfing, but I don't it's like one of the things that I like to not try to make always overly overt. Like some people might wonder, like, oh, like food trays, like why do you paint on food trays? Like food trays are great for body surfing, and so when you're kicking into a wave with your fins on, like the food tray will like suck you into the wave, and so that's kind of like a little nod to body surfing, which is something I love to do. And then obviously putting paint on it and turning it into like a fine art piece. And so yeah, that kind of relationship of like taking this like essentially like the surf ephemera and just kind of like reinterpreting it through a fine art lens is something that's been super fun. But yeah, as you can see, a lot of my work lately, I've just been shifted towards just doing this more large scale like panel work. But as far as like a typical day, you know, coming into the studio, I tend to come here pretty early just because I realize like by the time I get to like 3:30, like I'm completely useless. Like I'm totally checked out. Like I can't focus, but like I'm really sharp like at like 7:30. And so yeah, having the space is great to kind of bounce off of like computer stuff, jump away from that. I might like prep a panel, I might gesso something, or I might put color down or work on, you know, some detail, go back onto the computer, work for however long, hop into a meeting. And so it's kind of like my creative career like at large, where it's like I have multiple little things working on. But on like a smaller daily scale of like I can't just sit here and work on this thing. I need to like hop off and like work on something else and then go back on. And like I said, like I mentioned earlier, it's they begin to influence one another, where I'm like painting and I'm like, oh, like this layout and orientation, this would make a lot of sense on, you know, this flyer that we're working on for something, or this, you know, logo like element that I was having a hard time with like understanding how to like lay it out properly. Like I might do a stroke and think like, oh, that how that curves might apply perfectly for what I'm doing here. And so having these multiple things definitely keeps me creatively fresh and on my toes. But yeah, so it's like that's kind of basically like in the studio, like there's never really like a set routine. It's just like I'm literally here and then over there and then over there and at the table and you know, on the back patio, like ceiling, like a painting or something. Like I'm constantly just bouncing around.
And how do you approach subject material? You know, I see, you know, behind you are a couple of works that you showed recently. Maybe you can talk a bit about the upcoming show that you're in, but how do you pick what you want to feature in the work?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, I think just in like a very general sense, it's I try to see like what things from different like facets of my life can I merge together and have it make sense. Whether it's like taking, for me, like growing up, like my older sisters listened to like a ton of like West Coast rap music, and therefore like I listened to like rap music growing up, and so. But now, as an adult, it's like, oh, I was a late adopter into surfing, and I got really into surfing and totally dove into that culture, and that's why a lot of my work at times will be like, oh, there's these two different subject matters that like usually are siloed, um, but like, oh, how can I like take these two things and kind of like force them to work together? Um, and just that idea of like reinterpreting my surroundings, whether it's like physical surroundings or like within like my own thought process of like, oh, I've never thought about taking this element of like my life or my story or passions or interests or whatever and merging it with something else. And so I think that's where like a lot of my work comes from. And then yeah, as far as like a lot of the recent stuff that I've been doing and posting, a lot of it kind of deals with a lot of it has just like a Filipino subject matter, or like Asian American influence, or just like Asian, cultural influence in general. I think, yeah, it's something that, like I said, for a while, like I would design a certain way because like, oh, this is what people want to see, and I think within the last year and a half of developing like my actual like creative and fine art style, I've started to kind of challenge myself to be like, well, what do you want to create and what like feels really meaningful to you? And I think, yeah, for the first time, I think, especially during quarantine, like being able to paint much more, especially in the beginning, because I had nowhere to go. Um, I started to kind of like explore, subject matter that's more like correlated with, my Filipino heritage. And that's why a lot of the work that you see, like for instance, like behind me, there's like these two warriors that are fighting, but they're wearing like traditional kind of these like rain guards on their shoulder, and like a lot of the garments are kind of similar to what like just like a early Filipino tribal warrior would wear. And then behind, and then to the right of that one, if you can see it, there's just like a character on the back of like a carabao, which is like a Filipino water buffalo, which kind of symbolizes this idea of like the working class Filipino. And then he's wearing like a similar rain guard with like kind of like a rice field hat. And so yeah, a lot of the recent subject matter has, for me, been this idea of like how can I essentially take this symbolism that's like really important to me, but reframe it in my creative style. And then ultimately, like a lot of the work, I want to represent this sense of empowerment towards or for the Asian community. And I think the timing of this talk and everything that's kind of transpired, I mean, within the last few days, with throughout COVID and even prior to that, I think that's just been like a narrative that I've been personally dealing with for like a really long time of growing up and kind of feeding into like the model minority myth, or feeding into like the stereotype that like Asian people are passive. Like you can make jokes about them, like that's fine. Like make the Asian lady driver joke, or make the joke to DJ about his parents eating dog, or like make fun of his lunch. And for me, I would just kind of like as a youth, like just roll over and just be like, yeah, that's fine. Like it's just a joke. It's whatever. But I think this, especially this last year, and like I said, these last moments, like these last few days even, I felt like a personal connection to my work that I've never felt before, exploring this subject matter. And for me, it's yeah, it's been like this internal dialogue of trying to find strength and courage within my own culture, that for the longest time growing up, I was just embarrassed of like my upbringing. I was embarrassed of what my family ate, or like I had friends be like, I'd never met your parents like growing up. And it's, for me, it's like, well, I don't want you to meet my family because they're different. And like, I'm embarrassed by that. And I think for the first time, in, like I said, in the last few years, and especially recently with this newer body of work, for me, it's just taking these things that, I once was like very, embarrassed about, and things that I hid away, and using it as like, this is my strength. Like these things that I thought, these essentially these differences that I thought were my weakness were actually like the beautiful, like unique thing for me. And so as opposed to like pushing it away and being like, I don't know, like I don't really want to talk about my culture. I don't want to talk about like the Philippines, or like Filipino culture, or like what it's like to be, Asian, and flipping it on its head, and like, illustrating it in a way that like is tied to my kind of like Southern California, almost like street style of, aesthetic, and like painting, and like redefining it in a way that, like addresses like essentially all these stereotypes, and says like, no, everything that you thought about Asian people, or everything you thought about like my culture, is wrong. Like this is like a sense of strength for me, and it's something that I'm totally proud of. And I think that's why a lot of the work that I've been doing lately has just been like a manifestation of that like internal dialogue that I've had of, wanting to create work that says, that flips all these stereotypes on their head, or even just like completely destroys the stereotype that people might say, oh, Asian people are passive and they're weak and you can walk all over them. And for me, it's like creating a body of work that essentially says like, I beg to differ, like they're not, and so yeah, that's just been something, with a lot of my recent work, and obviously you'll see kind of like my influence of like the music I listen to and my different interests, but a lot of the stuff that is behind me, really is kind of addressing that directly.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing about that. And are you able to talk a little bit about the show that those works are going to?
Yeah, so there's a few pieces. It's actually the one on the ground, and there's two that are sitting over here. But there's a art show that I'm going to be in uh, early next month in San Francisco. It's all Filipino artists, and so that's why those specific pieces are just like all the references, like they totally tie back to just like Filipino culture and heritage. And so yeah, it's an awesome opportunity. Like I've never, like it's funny, like I didn't really have a network of like Filipino artists that like I knew, but I think because of, social media, like I've been able to build that bigger community. And I mean, the people at the gallery, like I've never met, but it's like I've met them now through just Instagram. And so yeah, those pieces will be heading there. And yeah, like I said, it's been awesome to kind of explore that like creative side of me that, was kind of tucked away, and now I'm beginning to kind of like put those pieces together and really manifest them through my art.
And I'm curious about the reception of those works, like with amongst your family and the community that you were open with, the community that you felt like you could really share who you were, and about share, your background. What has the reception from them been with these works?
Yeah, I think I mean, it's been awesome. I think yeah, it's funny. Like I said, it's not really knowing many for me. I just like my circle, my creative circle, I thought was like really big, but in reality, it's like I don't know any Filipino artists or many like Asian American artists. And I think, I mean, obviously within my own family, it's like my parents had been here a while ago, and there was like a big painting I'd worked on, and it had like a water buffalo in it. And I was like, just take it. And they were like, really? And like they were just super excited. And I think seeing, you know, like my heritage begin to like flow out of this artwork. I think it's been super cool, and I've been able to connect with a lot of people on a deeper level. And yeah, it's funny in a way. It's like a lot of this work. For a while, I was like really self-conscious of like, I don't know if I want to put this out because I don't know if people will understand it, because like the subject matter might not make any sense. They might be like, what is he painting? Why is that person wearing like one of those like big rice hats? But it's funny, people have just been super engaged with the work. Even like, I mean, non-Asian or Filipino people have been really interested and like inquired about purchasing work, or have purchased work that has that subject matter in it. But yeah, I think it's funny. It's almost like this work is like, from a visual standpoint, people might see and go, oh, that's super cool. And it's almost like this like Trojan horse of like, oh, well, it's actually packing like a really important message to me. And people might see and go, oh, that's super cool, and then begin to dissect it of like, oh, what is that thing he's sitting on? Oh, it's a water buffalo. And that's kind of like a symbol of like the resilience of the Filipino and like the working class Filipino. And like like these different themes, are like even as simple as like the straw hat, like that has been you know, interpreted in many ways and used as like a joke and like a punchline. And on Halloween, some guy might be wearing it and think it's funny, but in this setting, like it's not, like it's a symbol of strength. It's a symbol of, you know, power to me through the work. And so, like I said, it's taking those elements and kind of not even redefining them, because they were always those symbols to me, but using my creative language to like express it in a certain way that yeah, like I said, it's almost like a Trojan horse. Like people see it and then they don't, and then they begin to realize like, oh, it's actually packing a message.
I love those works, and I'm so glad that I was able to see them in person.
Yeah.
And congratulations on the show. That's exciting. I just want to see if there are any questions. If any of our audience has any questions, go ahead and type it into the chat box. And now's your chance if you have any burning questions for DJ. It's funny because I think, like, you know, we haven't known each other that long. But we've seen each other around, and we've kind of been, we have friends in common. We've been around this kind of same area for a while. And, you know, we really miss having breakfast across the street, which was like this amazing kind of creative and cultural hub. But I'm so glad that, you know, whatever our journey led us to this collaboration and to this, you know, to this talk. And we have a comment. Thank you for your activism around inclusion and support of the community. You have a gift in use of color and creative use of materials. Awesome how you are now embracing your heritage. So enjoyed this time with you. And another question, oh, well, we have a question. It says, what are some of your art role models? That's a great question.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I mean, there's a lot of like, you know, big artists I look up to, like absolutely, like, I mean, people like Barry McGee, which, as you know, MCA, have a close relationship with him. Like he's been super influential, especially like how he navigates like his subject matter and like execution style is just like, it's just across the board. Like there's so much happening. But yeah, it's funny when I think about like who are my art role models like today. I think it truly is a lot of my peers, like Demi in town, who's, you know, been doing art for such a long time, and Tosh Clements is like one of my good friends who's also an artist. I think, I don't know, I'm trying to think. I mean, there's like so many people who are like also, they're doing just a lot of creative work. And I think to like be friends with people on a personal level, friends with artists, and be able to feed off their energy is really important. And yeah, I think it's just that local community of like Michael Matheson also is like a local guy who's really talented. And like I said, it's feeding off that creative energy. And it's funny, like when I think about it, it's like I've met people who like who still are like my creative role models, but it's kind of like that saying of like, don't meet your heroes. And especially in the art world, they can get kind of tough. Of like, I met, you know, someone I was like, I still look up to massively, and I like totally just like, I don't know if I was like fanboying too hard, but like I left the moment and like I walked away and I was like, wow, I totally put my foot in my mouth. Like, I don't know if.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that. I'm a total fangirl, like the artist and of your work. It's like the artist that I feel so grateful to work with and meet. I kind of can't contain my admiration for them.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that might've been what it was, but yeah, at the end of the day, I have like, there's a lot of like influential, like well-known people that I look up to, but yeah, I think my art role models are truly the people who are like, you know, still working together, like with me in this like creative community in Santa Barbara. And obviously like outside of that, like I said, social media has been such a great tool to build community that like, there's people who are like, oh, this guy's like totally one of my close like art friends and friends in general. And I'm like, I have never met him in person, but we feed off each other's creative energy. And yeah, I think it's those people that are like with you in community. I think are really gonna like be super effective.
We have some other great questions coming through. How do you choose your color schemes?
That's kind of tough. I think I don't really know how I choose my color schemes fully. I think there's colors that I tend to use and I'm really comfortable with.
Definitely have a palette, like a very recognizable palette, and the tone. You know, you may introduce other colors, but I think the tone of the colors you pick are very recognizable.
Yeah. And I think that probably comes from the graphic design side of me where like in my files, I'll have like, it'll be 10 of the same thing, but they're all different color variations. And I'd done that like early since I started doing graphic design to like help figure out like, oh, what color should I use? And I think I have that same mindset when it comes to fine art of like, before like I'll draw out the general framework of whatever I'm working on, like a physical piece. And I'll literally just take all the paint out and I'll start like shifting them around on the table until I'm like, oh, these work together. Like it doesn't matter whether like this is the skin or this is like the hair. It's like, oh no, these four work together. So I'll just use that. And then a lot of my work is just like a heavy black on top, just to kind of like trap all that color in and create contrast. But yeah, for me, it's like literally in the moment, I just put paint on the table and I'm like, which one is it going to be? But obviously it's like yellow, red, and orange.
Well, at least right now.
Theme, yeah.
Someone wants to know if you're ever interested in having newly graduated design students work with you or under you, and do you ever work with design interns or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely love to. It's funny because I feel like I'm still like mentally an intern most of the time. I'm like, what am I doing? Like I'm spending like 20 minutes typing an email, deleting, taking out exclamation points because I add too many.
Oh, are you kidding? My
Yeah.
email's like half exclamation points.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that I'd love to do. I think I'm just still trying to figure out like, how do I even like properly, do that? But it is something that I'm really passionate about of like, encouraging people who are like up and coming and emerging. Like I still feel like I'm totally up and coming and emerging, but extending a hand to like, people who are in a similar position to me. And I think, yeah, it's kind of a bummer. Like I felt like there was times as I was coming up into my career where like, I felt like I was more stepped on than like pulled up. And so that's why for me, it's like whenever, anybody messages me or like shoots me a text or an email, like asking for any advice or even down to like, hey, how do you paint like this? I'll literally be like, oh, it's this brush. Here's the link. It's this paint. Here's the link to it. Here's like the panel. Here's the gesso. Because I think for me, if I'm worried about like my secrets or not like teaching people, then I'm not growing myself. And so as a creative, I'm always like, here's all the advice. Like, because I wish someone would have kind of like done that for me. And there was a lot of people who had helped out, but yeah, I try as best I can to like kind of extend a helping hand.
Yeah, I mean, you're incredibly generous with your time and just with, like you were saying, with the community. And I just want to ask one last question, which is, what is one piece of advice that you wish that you had received that you might give to younger artists or even your peers?
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I think it probably spans back to what I had mentioned before of like when I was kind of talking about just growing up and being really self-conscious about like in the sense of like my heritage and growing up in my culture and being embarrassed. And I think I wish I could kind of go back and tell myself like, no, everything that like makes you different is actually going to be like, those are your tools and that's where your uniqueness and strength is found. And so like I encourage people who are like, trying to like navigate, like, I don't know how to, like, I'm not good at like painting or like, I'm still trying to figure out design and who are kind of like trying to like explore that of like, things that like, for instance, I've said it before, but like, I'm really bad at like painting straight lines and like making my lines like really like nice and like tight. Like if you look closely at my paintings, all the like lines are like totally wobbly, but it got to a point where I was like, oh, this is my thing. I'm just going to own it. Like, this is totally like, the thing that I thought was my weakness, like I'm going to flip it and turn it into like my creative strength. And so, I mean, whatever like that may be for whatever, creative people are kind of like tuning in right now, it's like, find those things and learn how to just flip them and embrace them. And those things that, make you different. Like it doesn't need to be a bad thing. It doesn't need to be a weakness. Like it totally, can be your strength. Don't listen. Okay. So
Which one of your sisters is your favorite?
Okay, that's we need to kick that woman out. I don't know her.
Well, that's incredibly empowering, and I think just hearing from you in general, your process and your story, all of the amazing racial and social justice work that you're doing, and your support of the museum. You know, I just want to say that all the proceeds from the sales of the towels are going to the museum, and that's all, you know, DJ just being incredibly generous. So thank you for your time tonight, and thank you for your time in general. And tell everybody where they can find you and where your work is available for them to see.
You can find me, let's see, what is my Instagram handle? @_ DJ Javier, if you want to follow. My website is bionsurf.club. So it's www.bionsurf.club. Bion Surf Club is kind of like, it's obviously this physical space, but it's kind of like the moniker that I put all my creative practice under. And then as far as, you know, seeing my work or buying it, I'm right here, baby.
It's available.
Book.
Okay, good. Well, everybody, you know, follow DJ if you're not already. I'm sure you are. Hit him up if you're interested in the work. Check out our website for the towels, and join our newsletter for upcoming talks and launches and all sorts of fun things. And just one quick question: where can people find out about the BIPOC surf group when that becomes a thing?
Probably, I mean, like with like a lot of my work, it's just, I just use Instagram, like that's like the tool.
Right.
And so, yeah, that will be coming very soon because I need friends to surf with.
All right, everybody, follow
Yeah.
me. We want to know. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This talk will be available on our YouTube channel, and share with your friends. Hit us up if you have questions. Hit DJ up if you want to buy some work. And thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.